Hey there, YouTube! This week, well, you can see I've got a maintenance project going. So, stopped at Home Depot and picked up the Basement Watchdog battery backup sump pump system. So, I already have one of these, but it had gone out. In this review, I'm going to talk a little bit about what I see in this new one, as well as my experience using the old one, since this is supposed to be the 2019 equivalent to the one I bought previously. So if you haven't installed one of these before with your current sump pump, and I assume you have a sump pump already because otherwise you wouldn't be looking at a backup sump pump. What you need is you're going to need the backup system. You're going to need a battery to go in it because that's sold separately, and you also need acid because the battery comes empty. So make sure you get all that if you're trying to set up this system. The other thing you're going to need fittings like a Y to fit your new sump in line with your primary sump, and then also check valves so that way one sump doesn't blow into the other one sump pump doesn't blow into the other when you're trying to engage one or the other. As well as you're going to need all sorts of fittings, PVC glue, hacksaw to cut the PVC, all that other stuff. So there's more than just this involved in this project. So all that being said, let me get this other stuff aside and we're going to get this out and look at what's inside the box. Alright, I've pulled this stuff out of the box, and actually the pump itself was actually sitting inside the containment here when it was packed in the box. I'm gonna have to pack it all back up to get it back down in my basement. But anyway, you've got the waterproof housing. That's the same as before. You've got this control panel up here. You also have the float switch here. So you've got the float switch here, and I guess it's a dual float system. They said something about that. Then you've got the piece up here, which they give you a zip tie to tie it to the pipe so that way you can adjust where the height is. I actually use a hose clamp because I believe that's actually what went wrong with my old version of this. My old one lasted about 10 years, which is actually pretty good life out of anything you get nowadays. I was very pleased with that before. Eventually it stopped working, and when I tried to figure out what was going on, found out that the float had come off, fallen into the sump, so the pump had been running dry and it burned out the pump. And you know, these centrifugal pumps, you can either damage the wires in there by running it too hot, or you can seize up the centrifugal drive. And well, then there's also other things like you can get crap caught in the pump drive as well that prevents it from spinning and shooting the water through. I think I could get a lot more life out of this one than the other one because I know a potential problem to avoid. So you've got the wires on the pump, and so that just plugs into the back of the control unit here. And then obviously this part here is the outflow of water, and that hooks into the pipe, and you tie that into your sump system, the draining pipe. That's what you got, a T or Y into your system. Okay. So on the back here, you've got the plug-in. That's what the pump wire plugs into. You've got the float wire. You've got a fuse, then you've got the port to plug in your power cable. And then inside, you've got your two wires, your negative and your positive, and they actually marked the red one for you. Normally red is positive, and they actually have that marked for people who don't know that. This is actually a low water probe. So this goes into the battery. Now the batteries have little plugs on them so you can fill them with the acid initially and DI water as you lose fluid level in your battery. But you trade out one of your plugs with this one in particular, and it's got a hole in it so you can actually put your probe into the plug so it can sit in and detect if you've got low water level. And that's one of the alarms that can go off on your power unit here. One thing I noticed before with the one I used before is that it beeps a lot because you have power blips. It'll beep if the power's gone out to let you know the power's gone out. If your sump trips, because the float trips, it beeps. If the water goes low, it beeps. If the battery goes out, it beeps. These are all important, so you want it to do that, but it's just something to be aware of. Oh, and this one actually, because it's got the fuse on it, it has a fuse alarm on top as well. So lots and lots of nice little features on this thing. And it trickle charges your battery while the power's on, so that way you're always full when the power goes off and you've got the maximum capacity of the battery. Looks mostly the same. The panel is a little bit different. And also I notice a USB port. I guess this one also lets you wirelessly monitor it. So that's interesting to know as well. One thing to mention is that the batteries do go bad over time. I think my first battery lasted only 2 years. I actually put the date on the battery when I install it just so I can keep track. But then like the second battery lasted like 4 years. I think the third battery lasted until the unit itself went out. So you're looking at that as an added maintenance cost. But when you're looking at the cost of a battery or the cost of this unit versus the cost of getting like your HVAC system wet because of basement flooding due to a power outage, because when's your power most likely to go out? During a storm. When are you most likely to get the most water infiltration? During a storm. That's my driving factor for buying one of these. And it's saved our butts several times. And spending a couple $100s on this once a decade and then changing out a battery every few years, a couple $100s for those every few years or so, it's just minuscule cost to ensure that your basement doesn't flood. The financial aspects are just there why you should have one of these. All in all, I've been very pleased with the one I have. This one looks like an advancement over the one I've got, and so I'm very excited to get this one in. And if you don't have a backup, I would definitely recommend getting a backup. This brand has done well for me so far, so I would actually recommend them, even having not installed this one yet, because I expect it to behave like the one I had previously.